Hi, welcome to this video all about the importance of learning a modern foreign language, and we're going to dive in to explore how your incredible brain does that amazing job. And this video is to mark European Languages Day, which is on Sunday the 26th of September. Your brain is utterly amazing, and learning a modern foreign language is, for your neural circuits, the equivalent of a daily exercise habit. It is incredibly good for many aspects of your brain's network. And in this video, we're going to explore exactly what happens across your brain. Don't forget to follow us on social media. My name's Andrew, and our company is called Action Your Potential. Our mission is to help every single person, whatever age they are. That might be a school student, it might be a small child in early years, it might be a person in a business, it might be a parent, a teacher, anyone understand their amazing brains. And that's me, Andrew. And we've been running the company now for 4 years. We work in 140 schools and with 10 international businesses. If you're listening to this thinking, I need some of that, I need some of that neuroscience revolution to change my life, get in touch. So, you have everything you need at the top of your neck. 86 billion neurons. The brain is not the prettiest of organs. It's about 3 pounds of matter. And it's the most complicated 3 pounds of matter in the known universe. 86 billion neurons, an incredible amount of connectivity across the brain, and that connectivity is really important in terms of learning languages. Google, working with neuroscientists, have just started mapping small parts of the brain, 1 millimeter square of brain tissue. They found 130 million connections. That's 700 times more storage capacity than the desktop computer, and that is in a single millimeter of brain tissue. So you've got the kit, the neural kit, to do the job of learning a modern foreign language. And we're going to try and inspire, enthuse, and engage you in this video, looking at why it's so important to do that and why it would be so good for your brain. The program that we run across the schools that we work with is called Build a Neuro Ninja, and it's looking at well-being, it's looking at mind management, and it's looking at unleashing learning. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at how your brain decodes language. We're going to look at how the brain learns lots of information, particularly information around the kinds of knowledge that the brain holds, how we learn to walk and talk, and why that's different from learning to read, write, and speak a foreign language, and the importance of those differences, why a foreign language learning is great for your brain, and what cognitive reserve is, and why it's so important to nurture it in our brains throughout our lives. So our brains are learning machines, and they are designed to hold two types of knowledge in their physical structure. Primary biological knowledge, these are the skills that have been burnt down by evolution into the circuitry of our brain. What do we mean by that? We mean things that we do without needing to be taught, like walking. You don't need to teach a toddler to walk. They get up, they toddle about, they fall over, they toddle about, they fall over, and they start to walk. You don't need to teach a toddler to talk. They start babbling and slowly but surely begin to make sense. On the subject of babbling, have a listen to this fantastic conversation where the little toddler is making absolutely no sense, but Dad does a fantastic job of engaging them in what feels like a genuine conversation.
Okay. They need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Huh? Oh no, not this one. This is the grand finale of this one. Okay, the last? Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't break it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. And then it was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? Don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. 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 Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh?
Isn't that a great video? Another piece of knowledge that we just develop is facial recognition. From the moment babies arrive, they focus more on faces than other objects. That's been burnt into the circuitry, as is intuitive physics, knowing up and down and basic forces. That stuff is already in our brains and effectively unfurls inside development windows. What we mean is, at certain points as we're growing up, we suddenly develop those abilities over several weeks and months, and that has been burnt down into the circuitry by repeat processes over the course of our evolution. Then there's secondary biological knowledge. Into that category falls everything you learn at school: learning to read, learning to write, learning a foreign language, which is what this video is about. In order to develop secondary biological knowledge, we need instruction. We need to be coached, and we need to support and improve our secondary biological knowledge through practice, practice, practice. So, in terms of learning in the brain, let's talk about where that actually happens. It happens in the gaps between the neurons. This is an artist's representation of a synapse, which is a tiny gap between two neurons. You have got billions and billions of these synapses. They are 2,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair, and that is where we start encoding into the physical structure of our brains our learning. Learning is three processes. Learning is getting it. I understand how to pronounce that word. I understand what it means. Learning is practicing it, practicing that word, practicing pronunciation, practicing its meaning, perhaps using flashcards, and then using it, deploying it. That process, getting it, practicing it, and using it, is the process of learning. Learning is a process. It's not one action. You're not going to immediately understand stuff and immediately be able to recall it. Learning happens as a process because learning is about growing and strengthening connections across the brain. And if we keep repeating and repeating and repeating, what begins to happen is the neuron itself begins to develop thicker insulation. So when you're practicing languages, when you're practicing any skill, your action potentials, your electrical impulses are zipping down neurons, and the more you use the same neuron and the same network to do a similar activity, the thicker the insulation around that neuron becomes, which means the information gets passed quicker and quicker across that strengthened synapse. That's why practice is so important. So how does the brain learn written and spoken languages? Our home language or a modern foreign language is literally amazing. The brain works in a couple of ways in terms of processing information. It takes in sensory information, so our sense of sight and our sense of hearing and touch and smell, etc. And it also produces top-down processing, which is predictions. The brain trying to guess what information's coming in, and it's making those guesses on the basis of previous information. So top-down processing are circuits asking questions about the incoming information. So that word, where have I heard that word before? What does it mean? And beginning to make links across what the brain already knows. And then there's bottom-up processing, which is all that sensory information coming in to the brain. Brains are prediction engines using previous experiences to make best guesses about what's going on out in the world. That's why learning a modern foreign language can feel so difficult sometimes, because we haven't necessarily had experience of that language before. So let's look at how we learn to read, and that will help us understand some of the complexity that our brain goes through when it's learning a modern foreign language. What you need to understand is the brain is arranged in a series of connections and columns. And I want you to think about this hierarchy where you've got lines, which are like features of letters, all the way up to the letter itself. Think of that as a column of neurons. So those cells we saw just now, imagine a stack of neurons. The neurons at the bottom are simply looking out into the world via the information coming from the eyes for features of letters. A diagonal line, a cross piece, a curly bit. The next cells up in that stack are looking for features that connected together. The next cells up are looking for more connected features. And right at the top, there are cells that are looking at different sorts of the letter A, because we've seen the letter A in many different ways, in people's handwriting, in different fonts. And then finally, right at the top, there's a decision neuron that says, yes, that is an A, because its tower of neurons has arrived at that decision. Now, that decision tree happens in nanoseconds. In fact, now you've learnt a language, you see an A and you immediately know it's an A, but that has been a skill you have learnt over time. And that is why learning a language is so powerful for your brain. Learning to read and write in a home language or a modern foreign language. Look at what's going on across the brain. Many networks connected together. I'm not going to mention all these splodges, but it just gives you a sense of the power and importance of languages in terms of supporting brain connections, attention, concentration, etc. Let's look at that red splodge. Now, physically, that is located behind your left ear, and that is called the brain's letterbox. We now know that that area used to, before we invented alphabets about 10,000 years ago, that area used to recognize faces. And it now has been trained, once we've been taught to read, to recognize letters. It is in that red splodge there where those columns of neurons are, trying to work out the statistical features of a letter and then crying out that particular letter. That's where those neurons sit. When brains have learnt to read, you see different activation in that little bit of the brain's letterbox, a few millimeters of brain tissue just behind your left ear. And you can see on this diagram how all the different bits of the brain are involved. The reading brain, the whole brain is involved in the process. Reading, writing, learning a modern foreign language requires a resting state network and information sharing hubs. These are particular areas across the brain, and they communicate and connect quickly, accurately, and fluidly. That's why it's so good for the brain. It is like a workout for your brain. What's a resting state network and what's a hub? A resting state network is a group of neurons that is associated with a specific function. So it might be decoding letters, it might be linking the sound to that letter shape, it might be pronouncing that letter. Those networks are then connected through hubs like the brain's broadband, sending that information out across the brain and connecting it all together. So it's an incredibly intense experience that it feels, now we can read our home language, say, it feels effortless. But when you begin to learn a modern foreign language, you're beginning that process of training your brain around different letters, different pronunciations, different bits of comprehension in terms of what each word means. So when you learn a foreign language, you set your circuits a new challenge, and our circuits begin to adapt by cross-linking circuits from our home language to the new language, using what we know to connect and comprehend this new language. Your brain loves trying to solve problems like this. It thoroughly enjoys the solution-seeking process we undergo as we learn a new language. Except it's difficult sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes you're like, oh, really? Do I have to? I'm really struggling with this. Learning a language is hard and struggle, and sometimes we don't feel like we're up to the challenge. Why is that if there are circuits in the brain that really enjoy the experience? Well, we need to remember that our brain is a complicated set of circuits that evolved at different times to do different things. And they've all got different jobs. Some of them love learning, some of them love problem solving, some of them want to keep us safe from difficult emotions. Our brain is like a loud and noisy hall full of people. So there are some circuits in our brain that measure the progress we're making in learning. And when we're learning a language for the first time, it is painfully slow, isn't it? Slowly but surely, we're beginning to get our heads around what different words mean, and we're beginning to be able to pronounce those words. Those learning progress circuits, they watch our progress, and if we're not making enough progress, they might mean that we feel frustration or anxiety. Why is that happening in our brain? The reason that is happening is because back in the Stone Age, if you were struggling with a problem that you couldn't solve within 15 or 20 minutes, then you needed to get moving again in case you hadn't noticed a predator or you hadn't noticed where the tribe had gone. So those learning progress circuits can kick in when we're struggling. And what we need to understand is learning is struggle, learning is difficult, and when we're struggling, we should pause and we should rest and we should have another go. Also, when we're struggling, what can be happening is our emotional safety circuits don't like the feelings of struggle and can make us feel like we want to desist. And finally, we've got social judgment circuits that get involved and tell us that we're stupid and everyone else can do it and they beat us up. And all of that traffic can stop us focusing on the task. But the struggle itself is really good for our brain. So, struggle, mistakes, and effort are highways to learning. If you're not struggling, you're not learning, and learning a modern foreign language is a very good, healthy struggle for the brain. Think about that practice process as you're making mispronunciations, as you're forgetting that bit of comprehension. First attempt in learning, and we should approach a modern foreign language like a toddler approaches learning to walk. The more mistakes we make, the quicker the brain begins to strengthen the right connections and work out which particular pronunciations, which particular bits of comprehension are right. Learning a modern foreign language benefits the brain in a number of ways. It increases cognitive fluency between those resting state networks and those hubs we've talked about, enables you to build attention and focus, enhances cognitive reserve, which is effectively the number of pathways across your brain and how information is shared, increases neural growth, deepens our awareness of other cultures and empathy for other people, keeps our brain active, builds resilience and determination. Younger brains are neurally plastic and learn languages more quickly than older adults, but it's still good for us as adults to be learning a modern foreign language. Your brain is amazing. It loves solving complex problems. A modern foreign language is a juicy and engaging problem for your brain that benefits your whole brain and your cognitive profile. So, what are you waiting for? Let European Languages Day be your inspiration. Engage in learning a modern foreign language. We hope you found this video inspiring. Find more of our content at YouTube or come to actionyourpotential.org. Thanks for listening.